I'm so impressed. We don't get Haribo's at St Mary's. But then Keith told me it was, if you've got a mouthful of Haribo's, you'd have to listen and not talk. So that made sense as well. So, listening to one another. This actually springs out of when I came before, when I was talking about listening to God. The two are just so closely related. And some of us are better at listening to each other than others. But in fact, for each one of us, whether it comes easily or not, it's a God thing. And to really listen to somebody, we need the Holy Spirit to nudge and provoke us and to keep us attentive to each other. But maybe this will just give us an idea of what it's like to listen to others. How do I get that started? Press next. There's no next.
Oh, it's under the red. Sean, can you start with it? Right arrow on the keyboard, you'll need to press to start it, I think.
Oh.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head. And it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can go on? We can work it out.
It's not about the nail. We all struggle with really listening, and you may have seen that before. It's been around for a good few years, but it seems singularly appropriate to look at it again today. It's so easy for us to get distracted. Good listening is enabled by God. But Job's friends, sometimes called Job's comforters, get a really bad press, don't they? But look at this. Look at all the things that they do. For a start, they get together. And very often, if somebody's really struggling, it needs much more than just an individual. One person is great, but if we can have several people caring, it makes such a difference. And they come together, they, if you like, organize themselves to care. And they do have a deep desire to comfort Job. And of course that requires that we notice to start off with, that we notice that there's somebody who's got a problem. We're going to come on to noticing in a bit more detail in the second half of this talk and how significant it is for Jesus. But we do need to be in the habit of noticing those around us. It's sort of a bit culturally weird for us when we see somebody who's hurting to weep, tear our clothes, sprinkle dust, not the sort of thing we do. But what sort of things could we do to indicate the compassion we have for somebody? Here's one other thing, coming down the page there. Then they sat on the ground with him. To be in the right position to listen is so important. You know, somebody in a wheelchair, if you talk to them and you tower over them, it's really off-putting. We need to come down to people's level. And they were doing all the right things. They sat with him, not just for a few minutes, but for 7 days and 7 nights. It's a brilliant example of how to care and how to listen. Things only went pear-shaped when they actually talked. So often we want to jump in and fix it like the little video showed. But we need to have that ability to just sit and listen. And sometimes that can be quite difficult because somebody who's in pain in some way or other, and I know this community and individuals within it are deeply grieving over these last months. You need to be so careful with each other. But one of the common things with grieving, whether it's grieving for a lost person or grieving because you've lost your job or whatever else it might be, one of the really significant things is actually anger. Can you sit and continue to listen when anger is just blasted straight back at you? These poor guys had sat with Job for a whole week. They really did care. But facing anger, particularly if it's aimed at ourselves, can be so difficult to sit with. Yet it is one of the most common reactions to deep pain. And it can be aimed at themselves, at you, at God, and it won't be terribly rational. Can you sit there quietly with somebody when they're going, ah? Because that's what it's like. Grief explodes, and it explodes in all directions. What's it like to sit with somebody gently when things are so raw? Here you go, something to talk about. There's 4 little illustrations. Rather than try talking in a big group like that and like that, how about splitting into sort of 2s and 3s and just spend a couple of minutes saying what you think of those 4 pictures there. You might relate well to some you might think, oh, that's a bit dangerous. Whatever. Just talk now. Okay, talk to me now. What do you think about those? Are there some that you really like? Are there some that you want to just sort of comment on and say, well, I'm not sure? Tell me what you've been talking about.
We mentioned that because we work in context within sort of work and church and friends, that the sort of bottom right one was perhaps more of allowing people to carry on being sad, but without that need to ask whether you can touch them, because in a professional context you can't just do that.
Yeah, all good stuff. Yeah, that's.
The others are a bit more perhaps what you do with a friend or
Yeah. Yeah, really important to just give people space to talk. You know, one of the biggest things about grieving, if you've lost a partner, for instance, is that you want to tell the story again and again and again. One of the most, you won't be able to fix it, but one of the most healing things that keeps the journey going, the grief journey going in the right direction, is to actually listen and allow somebody to tell the story again, even though you've heard it 100 times. And maybe there's a moment when God just brings a thought to your mind, and you can ask a question or make a comment that helps the person tell the story again, but going just that bit deeper into the story. Any other comments about those pictures? Yes, Angela. That's absolutely right. And there's two pictures there that are very much about that. And it's really difficult to know whether somebody appreciates touch or not. Just 2 or 3 weeks ago, somebody at St. Mary's said, "Can you give me a hug?" But it comes from them. It was right out in the open, so everybody could see us, no problem. But we do need to be cautious about touch. And yet, touch can be so healing in itself. Any other thoughts? That's it. Yeah. To have it right there available. Yes. Excellent. Anything else? I think that's enough then for this particular bit. I get round 2 in a moment, which is quite fun. I don't get that at St. Mary's. But the truth will tell that so often when somebody's in pain, you can't fix it, but you can listen. Thank you, Keith. Listening to each other is so important. But here's a sort of pattern. Listen to God first, listen to others and give them a priority next, and we come third. So often we've got all our own stuff that wants to leap out there. And because we're thinking of all our own stuff, we miss what God's doing. But here's something that I found was really rather wonderful. Back in the Old Testament, we read about Hagar, who was the servant/slave of Abraham and Sarah. And she was badly treated, ran away. And when she ran away, she actually had a moment of meeting with God. And as a result of that meeting with God, she says, she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her: "You are the God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." It's about noticing. And I was rather taken with this quote from a book that I was reading recently. This lady is one of the leaders of Lectio 365 and the 24/7 prayer movement. She's an international speaker. And yet, this is one of her reactions when she went to a big conference. She talked about holding her coffee cup like a shield in front of her. And we all know that some of us actually like to escape to the kitchen and serve coffee rather than have to face somebody else. Yeah, that's a personality thing as well. So here's this lady who is a really impressive speaker and writer saying, "I'm shy, sometimes painfully so, but I also want to be seen. I want everyone to know what a wonderful, unique person I am. I'm special, delightful even. You should get to know me." I wonder if that resonates with anybody else. I went to a meeting recently, and I was the newbie in this group of half a dozen. And I realized after a while I was getting really uncomfortable. And it wasn't because everybody was talking and I was being left out. That was a tiny bit of it. And they knew all the stories and the connections between them. But I realized as I reflected on this, in my prayer time a couple of days later that what had really got to me was the eye contact was between all the other people of the group, and I was not being seen. Hagar knows that God sees her. Now, this just points to my own personal insecurities, and I'm working on those. But there's a lot of us out there who are working on those insecurities, and the effect of them is that so often we're so, I'm not being seen, that we don't notice other people. So let's recognize where we are. Hey, we're broken people. We haven't got it all made. And taking that into account, let's really focus, by the grace of God, on listening and noticing other people. Each person needs to know for themselves that the spotlight is on them personally. God's spotlight, his spotlight of love. It's from that place of security that we can begin to listen to other people. And every time we get to an insecure place, it becomes very difficult to listen attentively to others, because we're just so conscious of who we are and all the attention that we just long for. Now, it's possible, by the grace of God, to move on from this and to just focus on what Jesus does. Always a good place to start. If you look through the whole, live stream, I'm used to wandering around. If you look at the Gospels, reread them. Notice the number of times it said Jesus noticed or Jesus saw a person. It's the same as that Hagar thing of the God who sees me. And I just sort of thought I'd throw out a few incidents of it. So, John's Gospel. As he passed along, he noticed the man who was blind from birth. Matthew 9. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's office. He noticed. Here's another one. Jesus turned and saw her. Take heart, daughter, he said. Your faith has healed you. And the woman was healed at that moment. That woman was in the midst of a crowd and yet was seen by Jesus. This is at the heart of listening. Until we start noticing people, we will not in any way really listen to them. To notice them is the starting point. And we have to keep on asking ourselves the question, who's more important, me or the other person? To notice is to step back from ourselves and be aware of what's going on around us. And you know, when we start noticing people, we'll discover what a delightful, varied group of people there are in the room at any one time. Different people. People who we've never related to before. I mentioned the fact that we need to know the security of being known for ourselves. But we can go beyond that. We're called to notice people because all of us sort of need God with skin on to remind us. I remember when I became a Christian, the thing that made a difference was somebody inviting me for a cup of coffee. And that was the starting point. I had a pretty poor view of the human race at the time. So to be noticed in that way was of fundamental importance. We're called to notice people. So this is where it gets practical, folks. I know it's more difficult for some than others. You know, the raving extrovert really finds it difficult to stop talking long enough to to actually hear what others are saying. The introvert is at the opposite end. They don't even want to get close and listen. We all have our problems. But can you spend just a moment or two now in your little groups just talking about how this stuff might affect the behavior in this Christian community here, so that we can be better able at listening to each other after church, maybe, when it's coffee time. So, in your 2s and 3s, just have a chat about that for a minute. Okay, folks, let's have a little bit of feedback for a moment. Any sort of comments coming out of that about practical things that can help with this listening to each other? Or maybe there's a moment when you know that you've been listened to in the past and it made a difference to you. So, a few thoughts.
Well, I just mentioned that the noticing is not necessarily the difficult bit. The difficult bit is to go, I've noticed that, what do I say first? And I remember Jesus once given us a list of questions of how to approach somebody. What do you actually say yeah, I know it's very British to go, isn't it nice and sunny today? But that's not really a very satisfying...
Followed closely by, so what do you do? Yeah, bang on. Other things? Yes, Andrew. Yeah. Yes. I rejoice over the fact that there's such a thing as WhatsApp, because our grandchildren are all on WhatsApp. And sometimes when I'm praying in the morning, they'll just come to mind, and I can just whip off a little WhatsApp to them. It's not exactly listening, but it's about noticing. Other things? Yes, yeah. One thing I'm aware of is, as I go through the Gospels, Jesus is always doing the unexpected. He reacts in unexpected ways. And I have this suspicion that, yes, we can have our set of questions lurking in the back of our mind. That's really useful. But watch out for the Holy Spirit's nudge that makes you ask the totally different thing, that might just enable somebody to grow. That's what it's all about, them growing as a person and in their relationship to God. So here's a final thing. I was reminded of a Bible verse this morning that, transformed my life. And it's about noticing Jesus. So listen to this. You'll have heard it before, I expect. But I think this is something to respond to today, whether you responded to it yesterday or 50 years ago or what. Here it is. Jesus says, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I'll come in and eat with him, and he with me." I'm going to read that again. Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with her, and she with me. I invite you to be quiet with that for a moment, but maybe repeat that verse in your quiet times for the 40 days of Lent. It might be a very interesting experience. Let's be quiet. Lord, what does it mean for me to hear your voice today and open the door once more or for the first time and allow you into every bit of my life? By the power of your Spirit, speak into our heart, our mind, our spirit. To catch new glimpses of what that means for us individually. Amen.
Just while Fiona and the musicians come forward, for those of you who are wondering where that verse came from and are busily scrabbling around in the Gospels trying to find it, you will find it in Revelation chapter 3 and verse 20.